With our blockchain class created, let's build a test to make sure it works, as we intend. Let's create a new file called blockchain.test.js. So at the root of the project, make a new file called blockchain.test.js, which Jest will know to pick up because of the .test.js extension. First up, let's get access to the blockchain class by requiring it as a module. So make a const blockchain constant, assign it to requiring the local blockchain file, which holds our blockchain class. Then we'll describe this overall test with the described function from Jest. And then the first parameter, it's good enough to have blockchain as the message that we're using to contain these blockchain tests. Now we're going to have an arrow function as the second parameter of the described function. And then for each of the following tests, we'll want to test an instance of this blockchain class. So let's declare a let variable called BC, which eventually will set to a new instance of the blockchain class before each of our following unit tests. So before each of our following unit tests, well, we can handle that behavior with a before each function that runs before each following unit test. And then again, we want a fresh instance of this blockchain class. So we'll set BC to a new instance of this blockchain. So this has the effect of refreshing this blockchain instance to a new one before each of our following tests. So that way one test doesn't pollute the other as we go along, and they all start with a clean blockchain instance and a clean slate. So now that we have this fresh instance to work with, we can write our first unit test, which we handle with the it function. And the message that we want is to say, well, this blockchain should start with the Genesis block first. So the blockchain starts with the Genesis block. And then we have our arrow function as the second parameter again. And if we're going to test that the first block in our blockchain's array of blocks is the Genesis block, well, we need access to the Genesis block itself. So to access that, let's require the block module, which has that Genesis function. So we're going to require the block module right after our blockchain module. And now we can actually write our test with the expect function. So here's our expect function. And what is the data we're testing? Well, it's that first element within the chain of the blockchain instance. So we get bc.chain, the first element, which is at the 0th position, since arrays in JavaScript are 0 index. And then what do we expect this to equal? Well, we want it to equal the Genesis block, which we create with block.genesis. Excellent. Now we built another function in the blockchain class, which was the add block function. So let's test that with another it function. This time the parameter will be it adds a new block. Then we have our callback function over here. And the add block function takes one input, the data that the new block should store. So let's define a constant actually locally for this new function, and the data will be foo. So the constant is data, and then we'll assign it to a foo string, and that is what our new block will store. So we'll call bc.addBlock, and then we'll get that data. And to test that this worked properly, we'll look at the last block in our blockchain's chain, and we'll make sure that the data of that last block matches the fake data that we just created in the parameter of our add block function. So let's expect that the last element of our blockchain's chain array, and we get that last element by getting the length of the chain itself, so bc.chain.length, and then subtracting 1 from that, which will be the last element in the chain. And then let's check that its data, so .data, is equal to the fake data that we have local to this test. So perfect. We have two new tests for our blockchain. The test 1, that it starts with a Genesis block, and 2, that it can successfully add a new block to its chain. So we have this saved, and let's head back to the command line where we can actually see the test run. So now, with the test running in the background, if you had it still going, you should see that if all goes well, there are 2 total test suites that passed. 1, the block test, and 2nd, the blockchain test, with 4 overall tests. Now, if you want to see all of the tests run again, you can press A, And as you do so, it happens so quickly, so I'm going to do it once more and watch carefully. And it runs all of those tests over there. And now that we have all of our passing tests, we know that our blockchain class works just as we expected. And now we can rely on it moving forward. So next, we'll make this blockchain more powerful by adding functionality that supports systems with multiple contributors to this blockchain.